Mm. Now, welcome everybody to a second conversation on the topic of reflection about death and rituals of passing. I think this is a topic that I have started together with Belinda, well, some time ago, I think a month and a half ago. And I am pleased today to continue this exploration journey together with Belinda and Susan Patterson, who is our friend. And we've invited also Susan, and of course, we'll give a chance to Susan to introduce herself. And I will only say that today we have symbolically in this conversation, we have the East and the middle, let's say, and the west, because I am connecting from Netherlands, Belinda is connecting from Kuala Lumpur, right, from Malaysia, and Susan is coming into this conversation from USA, from Colorado. So we are apart. Yes, I think in between Belinda and Susan, there's 14 hours difference. And I'm in the middle, so to speak. I'm not in the middle in the image, actually, it doesn't matter, but that is the beauty, I would say, of diversity in one space. And the intention for the conversation today, it is to pretty much bring ourselves with all our professional and human hats that we have, coming from a personal lens and discussing about an important topic, we think. How do our beliefs and the culture, it's actually shaping our perspective about death and living. And we'll also maybe touch upon at some point why not dying and life, or death and life, because there was a thinking behind that. But that is all to be unfolded. And before we jump into the topic, I would like to invite Susan, and Belinda just disappeared for a
Yes,
second.
she did.
This is the beauty of connection online, this is what's happening
I'm
in the moment.
back.
We're just being in the moment. She's back, yes. And I never saw that, actually, Belinda. That was a learning moment for me, what StreamYard does, when the connection,
Yeah,
is a bit unstable. I never had somebody disappearing like this, and learning. We never
yeah.
see.
We've been experiencing. It's been reported. We've been experiencing poor connection.
Oh,
Yeah. The whole.
okay.
I can't say it's the whole of Asia, but yeah, I know Malaysia.
Oh boy.
We just
Yeah.
flow in trust,
Mhm.
as we say, and everything, it's part of the sharing process. So you know that's kind of how we're going to flow. So I just wanted to invite Susan, maybe Susan, to take like 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about, well, I know you have a lot of experience, but about your hats, maybe, and about the intention that you also bring with you for this conversation today.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this conversation. And I find the topic fascinating for several different reasons. And part of my experience, which is, what I can bring, is I I have not only sat with someone and been with them through their transition from life to death, but I also worked in the funeral industry. So I worked with a lot of people who had experienced death, and it was a very enlightening and eye opening experience. So I can bring that to the conversation as well as my own personal um, reflections on it. And as far as my hats go, I worked in corporate professional work for 40 years and retired from that a few years ago. And it was always my intention to go into my healing and teaching practice, because that's really my true calling. And realizing that I really had done that really through my corporate career, that what I really brought was the ability to help people feel comfortable with what they were doing in some new situation, where they're either learning something new or having to navigate through the newness of a new situation with a new team and that kind of thing. So with all of that, it just seemed like a natural next step to go to helping others be able to feel comfortable and work with their own personal growth when they're ready for that. And I've been actually doing that work with energy healing and teaching for over 20 years now. And so I feel like, those two things combined are very powerful, because as you all know, and this is something that the three of us have in common, is that we've had one foot in the corporate professional world and one foot in our personal growth, spiritual growth, awakening world as well. So it's a unique combination. And I think it's very powerful that we're able to bring that perspective, because we do live in this 3D world, and it's things happen, and we have bills to pay and kids to raise, and all of that sort of thing. So I'm looking very much forward to this today, and thank you again for inviting me. And I look forward to being involved in the group and serving however I can.
Well, thank you, Susan, for taking the time, and thank you for this introduction. Of course, Belinda, I talked, Susan talked, and I'm curious, maybe you want to say something in case you feel that you have something that resonated, or the Susan introduction brought it alive for you.
Oh, yeah. So I have always liked to be inspired, and then to inspire, and also to empower others. To try and break the barrier. I'm not much of a compliant person or a conformist. So yeah, that brought me to be that brought my life into the path of working with a group of people who like to push boundaries, and yeah, and I stick with that, and that resonates a lot with me even till now, whether in a community setting, in a corporate setting, or like recently I was at an exhibition. It's a very government based, and yet people pick up that uh, I'm different, so yeah, and it's okay to be different.
I guess that is indeed the message, and also what I'm taking out of that. It is what is common for the three of us, and I think what one of the things that brought us was, a search for answer. I would say go beyond within ourselves. I think there was a lot of inner search, and in our journeys of it just happened that we all got in the same place, or the life journey took us in search of the answer, and this is how we found each other. So and then we came together, and we, as I called, we have a sort of a sisterhood, and we've been in this I think partnership or space of reflection for about 2 years and a half now. And
Yes.
it's what, yeah, and across lives and challenges and everything, we've been there for each other, even through loss, because actually each of us, since we have been
Yes.
friends, We all suffered loss, and
Yeah.
had or gone through separations, and we have managed to be there for each other. And therefore, I thought, what a beautiful way to celebrate that and take this reflection about death and living together, because we've been in that part. And another thing that we also have in common, I think, it is about breaking karma, where karma means pattern. Yeah, so it isn't, I just want to put it out there, words are important. So karma is the way we choose to kind of react or respond to something repetitively. It's not only us, but maybe our the people that came before us, or our lineage, as we call it. And then being a karma breaker can be something that we choose differently. We stop and we say, do we really want to do this? I mean, I know that my mother and grandmother and my everybody did this, but does it make sense to me? And I think that's also something common for us. And this is inviting a little bit towards to kind of start and we kind of flow into the topic. And before I do that, I also want to mention to whoever is coming into this conversation, in case you have anything, suggestion, comments, you want to contribute or ask a question, please do so using the comment possibility on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and we will be able to see it, address it then. And even if we can't during our time together, we will be able to address it afterwards. And yes, thank you for the people who are watching now or later. That's applicable afterwards as well. Now, that being said, ladies, life and death, right? We had this, we chose together maybe this reflection from Lao Tzu, or Belinda, how do you pronounce
Lao
that?
Tzu. Lao
Lao
Tzu.
Tzu. Yeah, Lao Tzu. Life and death are one thread, the same line viewed from different sides. And maybe let's start there, because we come into life as children, right? And then we build this understanding. There isn't the word death doesn't mean anything. Of course, it is associated with something that is happening in the physical realm. But before you are able to face that, how did we, as children, if we reflect for each of us, we come from different religion paradigm, different cultural upbringing. I mean, the Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, and Belinda, what is your paradigm where you've been raised into?
Yeah, so I was raised Chinese Taoist, and then I had a yeah, I was curious about Buddhism, and then so I went to classes to learn about Buddhism. So it's I would say that in Asia, it's like a lot of us practice a bit of both.
Right.
For the Chinese. So I'm a Chinese heritage. I'm born in Malaysia. However, my roots are from China. So we practice a little bit of Taoism, a little bit of Confucius, and also Buddhism.
Right. And for you, Susan, what would be the background? And by the way, we mentioned this not because today it's not about religion, but we didn't choose for that when we came into the world, as many children don't. But you are somehow, this is the container somehow, and you get to learn about it much later in life, and then you kind of start to reflect. But Susan, for you, what was that paradigm that shaped your childhood understanding of death and living?
Well, growing up in the United States, we are, I would say, predominantly an Anglo Christian society here. And even though my parents were not practicing Christians, they were not part of any kind of a religious organization. I was definitely raised with those morals and those tenets, and so my views on death were really coming from that place of the Christian idea about what happens when you die. And, and then as we're going to talk about in a little bit, also about how you live, which reflects what happens when you die. So that's traditionally where, the terms that came up of, your grandma went to heaven to be with the angels, that sort of thing. That's a very Christian doctrine.
Right.
So that was the basis of my upbringing.
And I would say in that probably, Susan, we find each other, because that's what I grew up with as well. And in that respect, I mean, whether it is that direction, Catholic, Protestant, or something, and I think Orthodox, they do share this thing about heaven and hell. And so where I think there is, or my experience and my understanding, and by the way, this is our view, our lenses. I want to leave it out there. It is how we have experienced. By all means, whoever is watching this, take whatever you need, whatever it's serving you. We are not master of the truth. Each of us has their own truth. So we do not claim to own the truth, but we want to invite for reflection and awareness. And whether you're a coach or any mentor or anything that you do. So coming back, I think, yes, our perspective was a little bit like what you were saying with um, yes, heaven and hell and the commandments. And then when it comes to the dogma, and for me the dogma, or how you put it in practice, there were two things that I kind of heard. That's well, do what the priest says, not what the priest does. So that I always heard that from my parents. Then I also heard, things like yeah, what do you do? So you're part of let's go to a funeral. Okay, so this is how you got introduced. So I got introduced with that, with two things. One, hearing about it by going in the church when my grandparents would take me. So especially when I would be over the summer, because it was much more ingrained in their life. So they would take me to church. So there I would sit like a child, and I would be like, I have absolutely no clue what they're saying, but it's that, and you need to do that and this and that. And then it is really joining with the family, the moments like the rituals of passing, so the funerals. And this would be when somebody is trying to explain to you or observing something without necessarily fully placing, or somebody explaining to you what was happening. Why are we taking this chicken and we throw it over the grave? Because that was not very clear for me. Still, it is a question, so things like that. But these are rituals, and when I grew up, I've learned that there is a meaning and there is also a choice. But then let's not jump over ourselves. So that's a little bit from my perspective. And of course, I'm curious for you, Belinda and Susan, what brought about while you were growing, what shaped your beliefs about death from childhood to kind of early adulthood.
Okay. For me, definitely, I'm not an authority of even in terms of Taoism or Buddhism, but it's just, that's what shaped my belief. It's from the experience, of practicing as a practitioner, as practicing Taoist, and Buddhist at that time, and so that shapes how I see death, as with the rituals, as well as what we perceive is what happens after we die, right? Is the Buddhists, we believe in reincarnation, and that's why karma is a very huge thing for and doing the right thing, being kind, and doing and practicing like a true Buddhist. It's very important. Or even as a Taoist, being respecting your elders, and living a good life, they call it. It's very important because that contributes to what happens to you after you die. So
I'm curious,
that's
what
a
was defining what is a good life? Because I think for us, Susan, right, there's 10 commandments, I think. And I think with, maybe sometimes differences in wording and stuff, but the principle is the same. But I'm wondering for you, Belinda, what was defining the good, being a good, living a good life, or
good,
being
yeah, a good human being, right? Living
yes,
as a good
yes,
human being. Yeah, so it's like being compassionate. You don't steal. You don't. Yeah, you be kind. You give. So like a lot of this belief system that I adopt, and sometimes even to, and now that I have gone on the journey of, more awakening and more awareness, and it changes and it redefines, what is being good, living a good life. So now it's like whatever that I say now is more the authentic. That's what my belief is my perspective. It's like you say, my truth now. It's not what there are some that, of course I need to redefine further, and I still in search of, the answer that is for me. It might be the truth for me, it might not be the same for you, even though, we do share a lot of common things, among the three of us. It might not be the same for you, Adina. So like being good, sometimes when I want, when I don't want to buy something, and to me, I used to feel guilty, and that's like, oh, am I not kind? Like you said, I'm not living like a good human being. I can afford it, but I don't need it. And I don't want to have another, whatever, a person who is less privileged was trying to sell me, you know and that not does that term as not being kind. I can be kind, and buy that, or in exchange, for that kindness. However, it's like, but that I don't need that. So there used to be guilt that comes along with that, for not doing something like what we Taoists and the Buddhists believe.
yes. And I'm seeing Susan. I'm curious, Susan, what, of course, my question, but also what Belinda is saying. So, what brings this?
Mhm.
With we keeping in mind, what shaped, the journey from childhood, and what is it in what was it in your world, so to speak?
Well, I think I had in some ways an interesting upbringing. As I said, my parents did not. Uh, I have a term for it. Um, they both were exposed during their childhoods to pretty extreme religious views. And my father on the Episcopalian side, which is similar to Catholic, and then my mother, her family was staunch Southern Baptist. And in both of those cases, the doctrine is very much about suffering, and it's about fear. That if you don't do the right thing, and you don't, meet our expectations, then which are basically um, labeled as Jesus's expectations. That if you don't do that, you're going to go to hell. Bad things are going to happen to you. And so for my parents, they were like, no. They didn't buy into that, and as a result, my brother and myself, we were not really raised in a traditional religious way. However, we were still raised with all of the tenets of, as you're talking about, Belinda, tenets of the religion, which is, yes, being kind, being giving, turn the other cheek, right, turn the other cheek, give, to the point of sacrifice, and be obedient to your parents. That was a big one.
Yes. I think
Yes.
we
Be
can
obedient to your
recognize
parents.
that across
That's
cultures.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And those kinds of things. Don't lie, don't steal. Those kinds of things. And that overall, I think really resonated well in a lot of ways, because what I've discovered since is, and I've studied a lot of world religions, and the tenets are all the same. Really, when you really get down to it, they're the same. And it just, it's called something different, or you're worshiping a different deity, but the tenets are the same for living, and how to live in harmony. So there was that whole piece, but there were a lot of things that never really made any sense to me. And I would scratch my head. And when I did go to Sunday school, I would ask questions. One of them, the big one being, that in the Christian belief, that if you don't accept Jesus as your savior, you're lost. You're not going to heaven. And my question always was, well, what about all the people who don't know about Jesus? I mean, where do they go?
Fair
I
point.
mean,
I mean,
what?
yeah,
It's like,
if you
this
look at
never made
numbers,
any.
China
Yeah,
and India,
it's
I
just
mean, let's just put it this way.
exactly.
It's
I'm
like,
thinking about,
okay, yeah.
yeah, like the natives in Papua New Guinea. It's like, oh, where, are they bad people because they don't, that never made any sense to me. And so I was very conflicted about that part. And then there was a period of time during my teenage years when I got very involved with the church, and I had several friends who went there, and so I got very involved in the youth group and all of that. And it was a looking back on it now, I realized that it was an evangelical type of church. And so the whole premise of it was, and in the Christian doctrine, there is this whole deal about Jesus coming again, the second coming. And boy, if you don't have your stuff straight, man, I mean, it could happen any second. And you're either going to burn here or you're going to be taken to heaven. And that's that.
So
And
it's a
I
black
was,
and white, right? So
oh,
Susan, it's very
yes.
black and white,
Oh, yes.
and
And
there
I
isn't.
was terrified.
Yes.
I was terrified. And it was just like, I mean, I really struggled with it emotionally. And as a teenager, it's like you have your whole life ahead of you. And here I was, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not even going to have a life.
What do you mean? If you kiss a boy, it's like this, and if you do that, it's like that, and everything gets measured.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, like,
according to that, So
right. Watch out.
yes,
Watch out.
and
Watch what you're doing, because
I see everything, right?
everybody's watching. And
Exactly. Yeah.
it was like, okay. And I struggled with that for years, and really had to go deep and look at all of that. But along with that, that whole piece, which is also about death, right? I mean, and the whole idea that it's beyond your control, which of course it is, but that there was this attachment of judgment that went with it. So, those two things together shaped a lot about what I thought about death. And in our culture, I mean, it's very interesting also, because the United States is a big place. And what I've seen is that if you start on the East Coast, their rituals around death and dying are very different than on the West Coast. And on the West Coast, which where I grew up, the traditions are really, it's very interesting. People do not want to face death. There's this idea of you're always young, we're just going to kind of go do our thing and, and have fun and live life, and then when we get to the point of dealing with dying, it is very common here to just put the dying away somewhere. They don't stay at home, mostly. They're put into hospice care or put into some kind of hospital care. And what I've seen a lot is that even when you go to see that person, and they're on, ready to take their last breath, you're not going to talk about it. You're not going to talk about the fact that they're dying, and it's a very interesting phenomenon. And the other outcome of all of that is a lot of people, especially here on the West Coast, or on the West Coast where I grew up, I'm in the middle of the United States now, but where I grew up was the whole idea of, I just want to be cremated, scatter my ashes. I don't want any kind of funeral. I don't want any kind of memorial. I don't want anything. Just, don't do any of that. So there are these really interesting ideas around death, and there's very big difference, like I said, on the West Coast versus the East Coast, where there is a burial, there's a funeral, there's a wake, there's all the ritual that goes around, the death process and after death. So it's, I hope I've answered the question. It's an interesting phenomenon.
It is, and
to
it's
see.
a difficult. I think it's a difficult topic, and you touch on it. And I think this is why this is the purpose of this conversation. It is for us maybe to together, it's like holding hands symbolically or energetically, to kind of look into what this topic, which it's like it's somewhere in the back, something is going to happen, so something is like a type of sword, we all know it's going to come, but let's not talk about it. And I think I took that what you were underlining. And also when you were saying about between the cremation and burial, it reminds me, of my own experience with my brother. He when he took his last breath, he took it somewhere in Barcelona in Spain. And there the habit, it is very common that you have don't bury you. I'm losing the word. What did you say? A cremation, right?
Cremation.
Yeah, so we did that, but in doing that and respecting his wish, when we brought it back, you are faced with a bit of a problem, because according to the Orthodox Church, you actually need to be buried. And then here comes to a showstop to rituals, and also to a dilemma, an ethical dilemma. What do you do? Because if you go and be honest, it's like you're in peril, that you cannot necessarily complete the rituals of passing with the priest, with the community, ultimately that process of honoring the person that went, and everything might you might be in danger of starting everything with a lie. And then it invites the question, why is that why is it necessary? And I understand the symbolistic, and this is not me to questioning it, I just leave it there, and this is my experience. And it also created a conundrum in the family. So how do we go about? And then you have one who says, let's just say what they want to hear so we can fulfill this. And then you have another who says, well, how am I honoring my inner truth, and also how am I staying in integrity? And what did we do wrong? Because I didn't quite understand. And this is where it started to invite that idea of judgment. And also in a space, especially from coming maybe my 16 years living in Netherlands and everything, you go there and you say, I accept this, and I understand this, and I understand the value of this, and I understand the value of it. But this is the point where comes, I don't know if the critical thinking. I'm not debating about God, I'm not debating about hell and heaven, but I just want to honor and complete the rituals of passing? And would you be willing to meet me in honesty and integrity about the fact that he doesn't have a burial? Why is that important, and then you look at the symbolistic of everything also. So thank you, Susan, for bringing that, because that happened to us and it created a clash in our family. And it placed me in the face of, what do I do? And I chose to trust the priest, and to his own, what can I say, to his own benefit. And my respect for him and the hat and the symbol is that he understood, and I chose to say the truth and say, look, we respected his wish. He was in a different place, and this is how we brought him home. And he's actually, he's in a urn. He's not somewhere in the ground. And let's not go on a debate, but I'm honoring, and and does this do something for you, like in the sense of, does this put you in peril with the authority? And then you discuss about something else. You discuss about politics and other stuff, but this is not the point. That's not the point. And again, this is not about judgment. It is about functioning in a paradigm. When something is happening and you're meeting that, sometimes you're torn between what you've been brought up and the regulation of the community and the norms, and what a person actually wishes for. And then you kind of are left wonder, and you said, my Lord, neither my parents or my brother, they were extremely religious, but what did you say? It was with the, you had a wonderful word. So the predicament, or so they lived in the spirit of the moral compass, that the spiritual beliefs and everything, do good, all of the 10 commandments and all of that. So they honored that part, right? So when it comes to passing and death, here you are remaining in the back, and you say, hey, I actually don't know if there is a heaven or hell, and I am here. I just want to honor whatever it is to honor, what I've been brought up with. And then you go and you have the 7-day ritual and the 10 days ritual and then 1 month ritual, and then you keep being busy with that, and you're wondering, they didn't really believe in that and they didn't really go to church, but can I put their souls in peril? Because I don't know what's happening after death. So how can I stay, so this is the predicament, and he's like, and who's doing that, and who has the role in the family to do that? Is it the wife that was there, because I'm the sister this time? Oh, this time I'm the daughter, and this time I'm the wife. So how does that change? And again, we're not going to address that, but I just wanted to say how much it can be different. And it sends you, besides the fact that you have your pure pain of separation from somebody, it sends you in a conundrum. Also, you get in conversation or conflicts of opinion on how are we going to go forward on this. And then, yes, what do we need to do to honor the person that kind of is no longer physically present with us, and according to what rules, what stands here, and what is enough, and because of course, and how do you go on about, did I do enough? I'm not sure. I mean, and in this perspective, I'm saying that maybe into looking into this, because I'm realizing we passed halfway through our conversation, but I'm inviting you with this question. We lost in the past 2 years people that were dear to us. We had separation, and of course, looking at the perspective of, there is a child inside or something that learned how we need to do it and what is expected, but then there is also the adult who has his own vision. And then how did we marry this in order to honor or complete the ritual of passing and deal with death? And I think that takes us into the second part, which was about how do our beliefs and perspectives about death and living change with personal growth. Should we invite Susan this time
Belinda?
to talk, maybe, or
Oh,
Belinda? Whichever you want.
I can go. because I also want to address what you said earlier about the questions around ritual. And I'm going to speak to this as someone who did work in the funeral industry, and I worked with families who had someone who passed. And so my perspective about that actually has changed, I would say, because what I saw through all of that was how important it is to have that ritual, you know, and it can be something very simple, but it's the idea of the people that knew this person, you know, whether it's just friends or family or, you know, work colleagues, whatever the case is, that they come together and they remember, you know, they want to be there to remember, that pay their respects is what we call it here, and in some ways honor that person. But I will tell you that in every single case, well, with the exception of one where it was a very dysfunctional, toxic family situation, with that one exception, every single time that happened where there was a memorial, people came together, whether there was a burial there at the memorial park or whether it was a cremation, but when people got together, it always ended up in laughter. Always. People got together and they started telling stories, and cousins, you know, who hadn't seen each other in 20 years, you know, that had grown and now they had kids, and, you know, they're talking about, oh, I remember when we were kids and we did this and did that. And there's something very important about that ritual. There's something important about that gathering. And there's also something very cathartic about going through that, because, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I know I have, and especially since the pandemic, that there's a passing of time from when the person passes away. Okay. And you're dealing, you know, of course, you're dealing with grief around that and all of the things that have to be done. But when there's a large gap of time between that and the time that you have the ritual, there's something about that gathering and about that ritual that does give closure. There's something like, okay, now, all right, you know, we can move on. You know, there's just something about that. Like things are now settled. The person has been honored. They're, you know, they're in their resting place. You know, it's like, okay, you know, we resume with life. So I do want to address that because, again, you know, when I talk to people and they say, well, I don't want anything, it's like, okay, but you know what? It's not for you. It's for everybody else.
That's a very good point.
And they need that. Yeah, you're not here. You know?
Yeah.
It's super important because people love you and people care. And, you know, when they get together, it's just a very important thing. So I wanted to address that because there really is something about it that feeds us at a deep level. And I don't know why that is. You know, maybe it is a result of human conditioning. You know, maybe I don't really know, but I know that in every culture we deal with this, right? We all have our rituals. So I wanted to address that, and then the second part of what you're talking about how views have changed. For me, my views about death started changing, first of all, from the understanding that in the Christian tradition, you have one life. That's it. You have one life. You come here, you die, and you either go to heaven or hell, and your soul is there forever. I now don't buy that anymore. I mean, I actually, because of my my experiences and my teachings and my own personal growth, I've now come to be more in the camp of reincarnation, and that our soul reincarnates to have its own experiences and experience its own divinity. So that's, that for me is huge, because that makes all the difference in terms of, okay, well, what's actually happening when we're here, and the whole idea around fear, that we have to be afraid. And that also is something that has changed, and it affects the way I live, and that's why we talked about this term of living and death, because, it affects how we live, our views on death. So for me, it's been very freeing, because I look at life very differently now. Not, I don't have to live it from a place of fear, and I can live it from a place of exploration. And, well, what does happen with my soul? Because I very much believe that is what it is. And I think that in all of our rituals, that is what it's about, right? Our soul is either going somewhere else, or it's reincarnating, or it needs to be helped along wherever it's going. If we didn't have the concept of a soul, none of those rituals would exist. So to me, that, it's like, okay, and looking within that framework, how do we honor that? And it's also changed my views on the dying part of it, and that how people die and when they die, what there is about that, and when we know people who are in peril of dying, okay, a lot of times our religious beliefs say, okay, we're going to pray to God and ask him to heal this person. We want this person to get better, right? We want them to live. Okay, but that's what we want. That may not be their path. They may have chosen, there's this honoring of the other person and their path and what they want, and what they need, versus what I want from my own ego, because I want you to stay around because it makes me comfortable, right?
Or I'm afraid
I want you.
or I'm afraid to face the pain of separation, and I don't want you to
Yes.
go, right? So I want you to
Yes.
stay because it's going to be too
Yeah.
painful without you. Even if you are stuck in bed, even if you're not
Yes.
conscious, if you have dementia, or all of
Yeah.
these things, or debilitating pain or anything, but I can't bear the thought of you not being here. But then it's about me, and it isn't
Yes.
that much about the other person, right?
Yes.
And thank you, Susan, for bringing all
Yeah.
these wonderful points. And I'm, of course, curious, and I'm wondering if you want to add something before we
No,
invite Belinda to the.
No, because I know we've talked about this some, so I'm very interested to hear what Belinda has to say.
Yes.
Yeah. So for I'd like to pick up on the point of the ritual. For the Taoists and the Buddhists, the ritual is important. Like you said, it brings the family together. Somehow it's very healing. And it's very supportive. So you don't how do you say, you don't feel alone. You don't grieve alone. There is something very, very, very special when you grieve together. And you miss the person together, and you remember the good things, and the memories that you have with that person. It's very, very healing. So that ritual is really, really the rituals of the mourning and the wakes and the funeral. Is really for the living. of it's not so much for the person who has passed on. But for the Taoists and the Buddhists, from that perspective, it's very interesting that we have, for us, there's another perspective to that, for that ritual, is to have, it's almost like praying and to give a blessing, to bless the transition journey for the soul, because we all believe in reincarnations. So whether the Taoists or the Buddhists, we believe in reincarnation. So when we believe in the reincarnations, we believe that's the time of transition. So all of us come together to have all the rituals. It's to to have an easier and a gentler and transition for the soul of the ones that have passed on. So that's also, that whole funeral and all that rituals, it's for both parties, even for the one who have passed on, in our Chinese culture. And yeah, the second question is very interesting. Yeah, how the, my beliefs and my perspective about how, about death, and also how I live, has changed, because when I was younger, I always think that, when you die young, it's a sort of a karma, it's a bad karma, it's a punishment, and also, having said that, that's like premature death, right? But if you live too long, and you have dementia and you're suffering, and yet you're still living, you know, but you don't have you're not actually living, and that's, it's also kind of a bad karma, and punishment. However, all that changed now, with my growth and my personal journey, and as well as the evolvement. So I see it as, as you have completed this life, this journey, and the lessons that you need to learn, you have kind of like graduated, and now then your soul is ready to move on. Mhm. So I don't see it as, that's the death is kind of like a judgment anymore. So when you see it as a when I saw it as a judgment, I had a lot of fear. Like I said, there was a lot of guilt to not wanting to do something, like, even like you say, being obedient to my parent. Sometimes I disagree, but in order to keep the harmony, in order to live, in being, uh the good human being that conduct, I will have to shut myself up. I cannot disagree, because then I'm going against that. So that's very liberating when I change my perspective and views on death, and so it changed how I live.
Right. And I think I heard that also from Susan, because once you go out there, it seems that all three of us kind of went into a journey. And for me, it was, after a number of losses. But it's not only that. I think it's also observing different perspectives or along the way, because being in a different country, look, I didn't choose, but physically, I just stepped out of the paradigm of the spiritual, but also the dogmatic paradigm, because simply because here I was not having, the television or everybody or a community, a country that was respecting even on Easter or Christmas, and I was exposed to other habits and another life cycle and another beliefs, because this is more Calvinist and Lutheran, different ways of going that, and I and it also introduced me when I started to work and being in an organization with 42, nationalities, where if you talk right with other people about life events, and then you learn, and the child was born, okay, so how do you celebrate that? And somebody comes and bring that, and then somebody died, and what is happening? One is dressing in white, one is dressed in black, the other one gives food, the other one gives cakes, the other one is celebrating like this. Some talk about it, some don't talk about it, and then you want to be there for them, but you don't know exactly what to do. And then you learn from those moments of embarrassment and left, right, and you also figure out how people come towards you, and you say, oh, when I was in my own culture, that didn't happen. Okay, tell me more, so then curiosity was a good friend of all of this. So you get, and you kind of expand without looking, because just life is kind of giving you the possibility, and you kind of say, so they are doing differently, they are doing differently, they are doing, Okay, so who gets to decide? I'm completely lost here. When we have the Muslims, okay, not sure, heaven and okay. How about the Jewish people? How about the Buddhist? But how is Buddhist, and we have the Hindu, but they have so many deities. And what? So all of a sudden you're in that, and you say, so what do I believe in this? So a world of possibilities is open, and an invitation into, do you stick to your, because you can't stick to your paradigm, but you can also explore with curiosity. And what I chose to do was to look for the similarities and kind of listen with an ear, as you did, right? And I think this is what also made this beautiful, this sisterhood of ours, and this circle of ours of learning through the ages, because we came and we listen to the differences, but we also with an eye for what is similar, what is the underlying thing, and this is what we also want with this conversation that are happening on Coaching and Mentoring Festival, to kind of bring this awareness and an invitation to the professional coaches and mentors, but not only that, to the people of HR, to everybody, because everybody lives in a global world, and now we're all in the cloud. And in the cloud, there's undiscriminated. We all get in the cloud, and we're people. And then we have different colors, different belief systems, and all of it. And how do you go about that? And I think that is the intention of this conversation, to give an opportunity, for instance, for somebody who's in Romania. Everybody has we don't know, you might have friends in Malaysia, but you might not, and you might have friends in US and you might not. But even with those friends, do you ever talk about death and habits? And because that's not necessarily like the small talk type of conversation that you do. Yes.
No.
And I
And
guess
not the most comfortable conversation
Yeah.
to address.
exactly. And I think we don't, without making it too small, but we also want to make it closer or bring it closer, and show the power of this conversation, well, in owning our humanity. It doesn't matter of our system of beliefs. There is absolutely no judgment. Everything is okay. But it's just an invitation to conversation. And I think whether you're in a profession, what is happening to you if you have a client that steps in, he has a different color, he just buried something, I don't know, a parrot, a dog, or somebody who is a human, and how do you go about that? Do you address it? You don't address it? What do you do? And you would say, just knowing coaching or just knowing mentoring, yes, it's fine, you stick to that. And better yet, this is a sensitive topic, let's not address it, right?
Yeah.
But what if we do? What if we do? And I do realize that we have 24 minutes, and we might take 2 to 7 minutes to kind of close, because if we are to leave one thing about this, how do our beliefs and culture shape our perspective of death and living as something to take forward, what would that be for you? It can also be a moment of silence, because, hey, we're human beings.
I was waiting for Belinda.
Yeah. I really would go back to the saying that Lao Tzu has mentioned. The same line viewed from different sides. And that's really true to how we look at things differently now, because we have the yeah we had the courage to think about death, and also redefine it, like we shared. I'm not sure all the audience have heard of reincarnation or even thought about it, that the the souls moved on, you know. So yeah, it's like looking at the same thing, but from different sides and different views and different perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
I think I would like to leave this last thought for this group or whoever's going to watch this. It's very much um, an internal journey of the heart, and if you're willing to go on that journey as a coach or a mentor or anyone who a healer, anyone who is in service to others, this is a really important topic because we're all going to face it at one time or another. And this is an opportunity for your own personal growth, you know, to learn and to understand things at a much deeper level, because then that makes you even more powerful at what you do. And it also, you know, there's a lot of fear around it, a lot, you know, it was, oh, you know, got to talk about that because ultimately, whenever we do, it's about our own mortality, right? You know, and, you know, for the most part, although at my age now, it's like, okay, you know, I see it more and more, you
What
know,
do
like,
you
okay,
mean? You're
I
38,
know.
right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm 38. um, but it's a journey that I would encourage everyone to go on, especially if you're in service of others, because um, once you can do that and hold space for others when they're in this place of grieving, it's when they're their most vulnerable and when they're their most raw. And it takes a lot to hold that space for people, but once you do that, it changes you. And so I would very much encourage people, yes, go on this journey if you have the opportunity, you know, to look at this and be ready so that when a client does come to you, because ultimately it's going to happen, um, you know, that you're ready to embrace that and help that person through it. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So I also wanna leave. It is I think it enriches you. It helps you understand who you are, and um, in relationship to another, if you go as a professional, as you said, in service of others, whatever that might be, um, it allows for deeper connections. Um, Meaningful connections, because when you said powerful, I thought impactful, so something, because
Mm-hmm.
we all are in search to make a difference, because it is our drive, right, to bring a difference, to make it also this value of legacy. What do I leave behind, and where can I make a difference? And sometimes it is just enough to be with somebody, and while holding that space, meaning that just allowing the other one to either reflect or share or cry or whatever into this topic, because by shutting it down, there's a lot of loneliness, and it's only amplifying the fear. And I think I wanted to bring this topic of discussing about death, because when you look at death in the eye, and it can be that it is very physical in the sense that you've been through a difficult situation or at the limit, but it's also maybe mentally. I think let's start with mentally. When we look death in the eye, it's easier when you are in conversation with somebody else because you hold hands and look at death in the eye. But somehow, once you are able to do that, you are free. There's something that gets free there, and then you can take your power back, the power of being joyful, the power of staying in trust, the power of being present into here and now without the fear. And also, it is all fears. I'm going to say this, it stayed with me. I don't know where I read it or found it out there, but all fears can be tracked to the fear of death. So also, once you look at fear of death in the eye for yourself, then all of the other fears, can be addressed, tackled, and somehow liberating. I think it is liberating. That is what Belinda said, and Susan, you also said that. And what that journey implies, it is for everybody to discover. And all we can say, this is a starting point. You're not alone in that journey. You are not. And please come along with comments, questions, or discuss this with anyone that you feel comfortable with, or just stay with it and ask yourself, well, what is death to me? And what is good living for me? And by the end of the life, how did I want it to live? And what do I need to leave behind? Too many questions. Let's just say start with what is death to me?
Yeah.
So I want to, I don't know what's going to come. There might be another session together. I've enjoyed very much the time together. Thank you, Belinda, for staying up late. It's almost 12. I think, no, it's past 12 now in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Thank you so much after a long day. Susan, thank you for starting the day with us, together. And thank to everybody that anyone who has watched this, and we wish you a wonderful summer. And lovely ladies, maybe you can stay behind because I forgot to mention this after we close this, and I'm leaving it here live. But for everyone else, have a lovely summer and embrace everything that comes towards you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.